Hi, reading group. I hope you all are doing well and staying safe as usual. This week in class, we are going to start to talk about the topic of differentiation. So as you know, when we got started, we talked about literacy, 21st century literacy, content area literacy, what it means to be literate in your content area. Then we talked about barriers in general for comprehension and kind of focused in on barriers overall for your group of students, if that's 7th grade students in the math classroom, but what are some of those overall barriers to comprehension between a text and a student? Last week, you guys considered comprehension strategies and said, okay, if this is a barrier between a text and a student, here are the strategies that I would use to help overcome those strategies. But again, we were focusing on kind of your average 7th grade student, and for most of your students, will be able to comprehend the text when you've given them resources to overcome the barrier. Now this week we're going to start to get into differentiation, and so we are thinking about differentiating for all of our students, of course, but we're also being intentional in thinking about our stronger students, our weaker readers, and what we can do to accommodate all of our learners to help them to best comprehend and engage with the text. We'll continue to talk about that a little bit next week with motivation, because for some of our students, they can read the text and it's just a matter of them not wanting to read the text. So you've considered that a little bit. But next week, we're going to pick up on that again when it comes to motivation and inquiry and kind of how we can set up a lesson or a unit to help our students want to engage with the material. But for this week, we're going to be thinking about differentiation in a variety of ways to do so. So we know with differentiation that part of that can also be students who have additional needs, disabilities, accommodations, and we are not specifically going to get into things such as IEP plans. However, some of those same barriers for students that may help a student with an IEP or something like that may be helpful for all of our students. So we are thinking more about students who, don't necessarily have an IEP or a very specific determined plan for helping them to read and to comprehend, but we are thinking about all of the different ways that we can just set up our instruction that may help those students, but will also help all of our students. So in thinking about ways to differentiate, you'll notice that in the Hinchman chapter, they break it down really nicely into ways that we can accommodate students to help to achieve the same goal. And I'm going to show you guys a chart because it's related to what you're going to be doing for your assignment for this week. So I'll get more into that in just a minute. But then in the Beers text, where they talk about building academic success, this is with struggling readers specifically. And they have excellent suggestions in general. And then one thing that's in that chapter specifically is this idea of thinking maps, which you may or may not have heard of in the past. You may have heard of the language like graphic organizers, and it's similar to that. But graphic organizers, thinking tools, thinking maps are excellent resources for students who have a hard time understanding the relationship amongst text that they are reading. So you guys are going to be doing some practicing with that as well. Those of you who are going to be discussing in class, we will be discussing Monday morning. Those of you guys who are discussing through the discussion forum, you'll see that you will be engaging with these same ideas, posting first by Thursday night and then responding by Sunday night. And then all of you will be working on this assignment that's going to ask you to consider ways that you would differentiate the lesson that you created for last week. So last week you guys did the BDA lesson, what you were going to do before, during, and after. You considered, ways that you would use comprehension strategies to help, in general, all of your students overcome any barriers between the student and text. Now you're going to be considering ways that you can differentiate even further and even more specifically, depending on the barriers that exist for some students. And so the way that you're going to be doing that, and I have an awesome resource there for you too, for how to use that SIOP model, which is one of the ones that was referenced in the text. But you see here that what you guys are going to be doing is using this framework for differentiation. And this was mentioned in the Hinchman text. They said, if you are differentiating, we can differentiate based on students' readiness, their interest, and their learning styles. And then what could we differentiate? We can differentiate the content, the process, the product, and the assessment. And so for the text that you created the BDA lesson for last week, you are now going to be filling out this table with ideas for how you could further differentiate for each of these factors. So for example, for the content, and I kind of mentioned there, it's not that you're just all of a sudden saying, oh, now they're not reading the article they were going to read, but you may add additional supplementary content to help students who aren't quite ready, students who are struggling readers, that may help them better understand the content. So that may be something like bringing in visuals. That may be something like bringing in an easier text. That may be you providing for students a summary of the text they're going to read before they read the text. But this will be what you can do for the content to complement what they are already going to be reading for you. You're not just throwing the text out that you used before. You are now going to figure out what else can I add to the content to make this easier for my students to be able to comprehend. Your students who may not be ready for that level of text yet. Beyond that, we also think about students' interests. So this may be something like asking the students to do like a 4 corners activity before they start reading the text to get them interested. Maybe you're going to pull out some of the themes. Maybe you're going to find out how much students already know about a certain topic. But what are you going to do for the students who may not be as interested to read the text to better accommodate them? And then lastly, thinking about the learning styles and the content. So for example, your students who may be more visual learners, you may, again, kind of bring in images. So maybe you're bringing in images that would help them to understand an article or a chapter about a war that they're reading about. So what are you going to bring in for your students with different learning styles? What's one example, right? So you guys, there's not right or wrong answers here. There's tons of examples for things that you can choose. But one specific additional way that you could accommodate students within each of these different areas. So then you'll do the same thing for the process. How might you adjust the process for students who aren't quite ready for reading the text? So this may be something like reading the first paragraph out loud, because you know your students are going to have a hard time with comprehension. So you're going to model it first. You're going to read it out loud first. You're going to slow down the process for them. You're going to model the process for them. Students who may not be interested in this for the process, maybe you're going to speed up the process a little bit. Maybe you're going to let them read in groups so that they are more interested while they are reading. Maybe you're going to make something, enjoyable or fun as they're reading. After they read a section, you're going to have them act it out for their classmates, because that would be more engaging for the students. And then the same thing with learning styles. How might we adapt the process? Maybe for your kids who are those kinds of kids who like to get up and run around the classroom, you're going to have a game where after they read the article, they're going to get to run to one of 4 corners. If they are making predictions, who thinks this is going to happen? Go to the first corner, the second corner, third and fourth. But you're going to adapt it so that your kiddos who learn, for kinesthetic learners, or maybe it's a project that they're going to be doing, so they get to do this hands-on learning, or working in groups, because they're kids who thrive when they're able to discuss with their classmates. So all different kinds of examples. You just have to come up with one example in each of the boxes for how you would accommodate. So the product, whatever it is that they're doing to demonstrate their learning, which also may be the assessment. It may just be something they're doing at the end of that lesson. That's more of like a formative assessment, or something that they're creating as a group, which may or may not be their final assessment that they may be working on individually. But the product and the assessment sometimes are one and the same, but come up with ideas for both. What are they going to be doing or creating? So maybe at the end of reading the article, the product is going to be that they are going to be creating a podcast about climate change, for example, which may also be the assessment. Or the product may be that they are going to be summarizing the information on climate change, and then their assessment is going to be that they're going to be creating a podcast. The product is what they're creating to demonstrate their learning. The assessment is what you're going to be collecting, which may also be, after they've worked as a group, individually, to determine the extent to which each of your students is able to do what you want them to do, and know what you want them to know. So then the second part of this comes back to what I mentioned about thinking maps. So the Beers text has several examples of thinking maps that you're going to consider the text, again, that you used that the week when you did the BDA lesson, and you are going to be determining one of those thinking maps that you think would work best for helping students to understand the connections among information that they're reading in the text. So you're going to be choosing one of those thinking maps, creating the thinking map that they would be using, and then give me a rationale for why this specific thinking map would be best for helping your struggling readers, your lower level readers, to best comprehend the text that they are reading. Okay. As always, let me know if you guys have any questions, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with.